The sound of Nicole's phone buzzing upstairs for the 15th time tonight was starting to make my eye twitch. I sat in my basement workshop at 11:30 p.m., wearing nothing but boxers and a ratty Red Sox t-shirt, trying to fix the wobbly leg on our antique dining chair. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, desperately trying to repair something that was probably beyond saving, just like my marriage. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Tom Richardson, and I'm a 38-year-old IT consultant who thought he'd figured out life. I've got a decent business, a beautifully restored townhouse in Millbrook, Maine, and what I used to think was a solid marriage. Turns out, I'm an idiot. The buzzing stopped, then started again immediately. I could hear Nicole's footsteps pacing across our bedroom floor above me, her voice a low murmur as she talked to whoever was so damn important at this hour. Again. I tightened the chair's leg joint with more force than necessary, the wood creaking in protest. "Easy there, buddy," I muttered to the chair. "We're both falling apart, but at least you're honest about it." The basement door opened, and Nicole's designer heels clicked down the wooden steps. She appeared in my peripheral vision, looking surprised to find me there, which was strange considering this was my house and my workshop. "Oh, you're still awake," she said, smoothing her silk pajamas. Even at nearly midnight, Nicole looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. At 36, she still turned heads wherever she went, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of figure that made other women hate her on sight. She worked in real estate and treated everything in life like a negotiation she intended to win. "Hard to sleep with all the buzzing," I said, not looking up from my work. "Your phone's more active than a teenage boy's browser history." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." "At midnight? Must be some international property deals." Nicole perched on the edge of my workbench, careful not to disturb my tools. She had this way of invading my space while making it seem casual, like she was doing me a favor by gracing me with her presence. "Tom, we need to talk." Those 4 words. Every married man knows those 4 words are the beginning of the end of something. I set down my screwdriver and finally looked at her. "About your midnight work calls?" "About Derick." Derick, her ex-husband, the blue-collar mechanic who ran his own auto shop downtown and looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a romance novel. If romance novels featured guys with permanent grease under their fingernails and a tendency to solve problems with their fists. "What about him?" Nicole took a deep breath, like she was preparing for a business presentation. "He's been going through a rough patch. His shop is struggling and he's been reaching out for support. Emotional support. And you've been providing it. He's a good man, Tom. He was there for me during a difficult time in my life, and I'm not going to abandon him now just because we're married." I picked up the screwdriver again, needing something to do with my hands. "Define emotional support. Lunch meetings, coffee, sometimes dinner when he really needs to talk. How often?" "That's not the point." "How often, Nicole?" She shifted uncomfortably. 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 4. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You see your ex-husband 4 times a week for emotional support, and I'm just finding out about it now?" "I knew you'd react like this. This is exactly why I didn't tell you." "React like what? Like a husband who expects basic honesty from his wife?" Nicole stood up, crossing her arms. "Derick is going to remain in my life. That's not negotiable. You can either deal with it, or you can leave." The basement went quiet, except for the hum of my space heater. I looked at my wife. Really looked at her. The woman I'd married 3 years ago, the woman I'd bought this house for, the woman I'd reorganized my entire life around. She was giving me an ultimatum about another man. "Those are my only options?" I asked. "Deal with it or leave?" "Yes." I set down the screwdriver and stood up, meeting her eyes. I choose option 3. Nicole's perfectly plucked eyebrows furrowed. What's option 3? I smiled, and I could see it made her uncomfortable. You'll find out. She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read my expression. Nicole was used to controlling conversations, manipulating outcomes, getting her way through a combination of beauty, tears, and strategic emotional manipulation. But she couldn't get a read on me, and that bothered her. Don't be dramatic, Tom. This doesn't have to be complicated. You're right. It doesn't. She waited for me to elaborate, but I just picked up my tools and started putting them away. After another minute of uncomfortable silence, she clicked back up the stairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a half-repaired chair. I finished cleaning up my workspace, my mind racing. 3 years of marriage, and Nicole had just casually informed me that her ex-husband was a permanent fixture in her life, whether I liked it or not. The phone calls, the late nights, the sudden interest in working dinners. It all made sense now. As I headed upstairs, I noticed Nicole had left her purse on the kitchen counter. Her phone was sticking out of it, screen dark, but somehow still menacing. Next to her purse was a business card I'd never seen before, Derick's auto shop. Someone had written, "Lunch next week," on the back in Nicole's handwriting. I picked up the card, studying it. Derick Morrison, Morrison's Auto Repair. I'd never met the man, but I was starting to think that needed to change. Option 3, I repeated to myself, pocketing the card. I always wanted to compare notes with her exes, just didn't expect to need a spreadsheet. The Millbrook diner occupied a corner spot on Main Street, the kind of place where the coffee was strong, the pie was homemade, and everyone minded everyone else's business. It was exactly the sort of establishment where a man might have an enlightening conversation with his wife's ex-husband. I'd called Derick that morning, introducing myself with casual friendliness. "Hey, this is Tom Richardson, Nicole's husband. I was wondering if you'd like to grab lunch sometime. You know, get to know each other better." There had been a long pause on the other end of the line. Sure. I guess that makes sense." Now, here I sat in a cracked vinyl booth, watching Derick Morrison walk through the diner's front door. He was exactly what I'd expected. 6'2", broad shoulders, the kind of rugged good looks that made women forget their own names. He wore work clothes that were clean but showed the permanent stains of his trade. His handshake was firm, his eyes cautious. "Tom, right? Nicole's mentioned you." "I bet she has. Nothing too flattering, I hope." Derick slid into the booth across from me, his massive frame making the furniture look like it belonged in a dollhouse. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Dolores, who'd probably been working here since the Carter administration, appeared with coffee and menus. "The usual, Derick?" she asked. "Yeah, thanks, Dolores. And whatever my friend here wants." I ordered a burger and fries, keeping things simple. This wasn't about the food anyway. "So," Derick said once Dolores had wandered off, "this is weird." "Which part? The fact that my wife's ex-husband knows her better than I do, or the fact that I'm just now finding out about it?" Derick's jaw tightened. "Look, man, if Nicole didn't tell you about our friendship, that's between you and her. I'm not trying to cause problems." "Friendship? Is that what we're calling it?" "What else would we call it?" I leaned back in the booth, studying his face. Derick had the look of a man who was tired of being caught in the middle of something he didn't fully understand. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hands showed the nervous energy of someone who worked with them for a living. "How long have you two been divorced?" I asked. 4 years. We were married for 6. "And you've stayed close all this time?" Derick looked out the window at the street beyond. "Nicole's complicated. When we were married, I thought I understood her. Turns out I didn't understand anything." "What do you mean?" He was quiet for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" "About the others." My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. What others? Derick pulled out his phone, scrolling through his messages. Look, I like you already, Tom. You seem like a decent guy, but Nicole, she's not the woman you think she is. He turned his phone toward me, showing a text conversation. The messages were from Nicole, sent over the past few weeks. They were flirty, suggestive, talking about old times and what they used to have together. One message from just 2 days ago read, "Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake letting you go." She sent these while married to you, Derick said. But here's the thing. She's been sending similar messages to other guys too. Other guys? Brad Hutchins, her college boyfriend. He owns that new restaurant downtown, The Wharf. Marcus Chen from her real estate office. And there's some new guy, Aiden something, who sells luxury cars. Nicole keeps all of us on rotation. The burger arrived, but I'd lost my appetite. You're telling me my wife is juggling multiple relationships? I'm telling you your wife treats men like investment portfolios. She keeps us all active in case one of us stops paying dividends. Derick leaned forward, his voice dropping. When we were married, I thought her friendships with other guys were innocent. I trusted her. Then I found out she'd been telling Brad that our marriage was a mistake. Telling Marcus that she was thinking about leaving me. Telling some investment banker that she was already separated. She had backup plans for her backup plans. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been where you are, and because I'm tired of being used. He showed me another text. This is from yesterday. She's asking if I want to reconnect now that she's reconsidering her priorities. I stared at the message, my mind reeling. If you know what she's doing, why do you keep responding? Derick's smile was bitter. Good question. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I keep hoping she'll change. Or maybe I just want to see how this all plays out. What do you mean? Nicole's getting sloppy. She used to be more careful about keeping her different worlds separate. But lately, she's been making mistakes. Sending texts to the wrong guys, double booking dinner dates, telling contradictory stories. It's like she's so confident in her ability to manipulate people that she's stopped paying attention to details. I thought about Nicole's phone calls, her late nights, her sudden interest in work dinners. Everything was starting to make sense. There's something else, Derick said. The new guy, Aiden? He doesn't know about the rest of us. Nicole's been telling him she's unhappy in her marriage and thinking about leaving you. She's setting him up to be her next husband while keeping the rest of us as backup options. How do you know all this? Small town. People talk. And Nicole's not as subtle as she thinks she is. I sat back in the booth, processing everything Derick had told me. My wife wasn't just having an emotional affair. She was running a sophisticated operation designed to ensure she always had multiple options available. What are you going to do? Derick asked. I told Nicole I was choosing option 3. What's option 3? I smiled, and this time there was genuine humor in it. I'm still figuring that out. But I think it's going to be educational for everyone involved. Derick grinned back. Count me in. What? Look, I'm tired of being Nicole's safety net. If you're planning something that'll make her face consequences for once, I want to help. I extended my hand across the table. Partners? Partners. As we shook hands, I couldn't help but think that Nicole had made a critical error in her calculations. She'd assumed all her backup plans would remain separate, manageable, controllable. But she'd never considered what might happen if her backup plans started comparing notes. Turns out I'm not her plan B, I thought to myself as we left the diner. I'm plan C, D, and E. If Nicole ran NASA, she'd keep a backup rocket, just in case. Too bad for her that all her rockets are about to explode on the launch pad. That evening, Nicole announced she had a work dinner and wouldn't be home until late. She kissed my cheek with the casual affection of someone who believed she had everything under control, grabbed her purse, and headed out into the October night. I waited exactly 30 minutes before heading to her home office. Nicole's office was her sanctuary, a perfectly organized space with expensive furniture, motivational posters about success, and a massive desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. She usually kept her laptop locked, but tonight she'd been careless. In her rush to get ready for her work dinner, she'd left it open and logged in. I sat in her leather chair, my conscience wrestling with my curiosity. On one hand, snooping through my wife's computer was a violation of privacy. On the other hand, my wife was apparently running a small-scale emotional pyramid scheme, and I was tired of being the only person in my marriage who wasn't informed about my marriage. Curiosity won. Her email was a treasure trove of information. Nicole had separate folders for different aspects of her life: work, family, and one labeled personal that contained more subfolders than a government filing system. Each man in her life had his own folder: Derick, Brad, Marcus, and Aiden. I started with Aiden's folder. Aiden Blackwood was 33, owned a luxury car dealership, and lived in one of those glass high-rise apartments that screamed, "I have money and want everyone to know it." Based on his photos, he looked like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Perfectly styled hair, expensive suits, and the kind of smile that suggested he'd never heard the word no in his life. The email chain between Nicole and Aiden painted a picture of a relationship that had moved far beyond friendship. They'd been seeing each other for 3 months, meeting for dinners, weekend drives, and what Nicole euphemistically called private showings of luxury cars. Aiden's messages were full of talk about their future together and his excitement about Nicole finally leaving her mistake of a marriage. In one particularly revealing exchange from last week, Aiden had written, "I've already started looking at houses for us. Something worthy of a woman like you. Your husband sounds like a loser who doesn't appreciate what he has." Nicole's response, "Tom is a good man, but he's not ambitious like you. He's content with his little IT business and his little house. I need someone who thinks bigger." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold anger settle in my chest. My little IT business generated more income than Nicole's real estate career, and my little house was a fully restored Victorian that she'd fallen in love with the moment she saw it. But apparently, none of that mattered when she was presenting herself to her luxury car dealer. The Brad folder was equally enlightening. Brad Hutchins, the restaurant owner, believed Nicole was staying in her marriage for financial security, but was planning to leave once she'd secured her future. Their correspondence was full of romantic nostalgia about their college relationship and plans to recapture what we had. Marcus Chen, her colleague at the real estate office, was under the impression that Nicole's marriage was already over in all but name, and she was just waiting for the right time to make it official. Their emails were more professional, but included subtle references to weekend meetings and private consultations. And then there was Derick, poor, loyal Derick, who apparently served as Nicole's emotional dumping ground. She told him things she didn't tell the others: complaints about me, doubts about her choices, fears about her future. But she also fed him hope, suggesting that she sometimes wondered if divorcing him had been a mistake. Each man received a carefully crafted version of Nicole that appealed to his specific desires and insecurities. Aiden got the ambitious woman who deserved luxury. Brad got the romantic who wanted to recapture lost love. Marcus got the pragmatic professional making calculated decisions. Derick got the confused woman who might still love him. It was masterful, really. Nicole had created a sustainable system where each man felt special, chosen, and important, while none of them received enough attention to become demanding or suspicious. She was like an emotional day trader, carefully managing her portfolio to maximize returns while minimizing risk. But the most interesting folder was labeled Plans. This contained Nicole's actual strategy documents, and yes, she'd actually created strategy documents for managing her relationships. There were profiles of each man, including their financial situations, emotional vulnerabilities, and usefulness ratings. There were calendars showing how she scheduled time with each of them to avoid conflicts. There were even contingency plans for various scenarios, including what she called the Tom problem. According to her notes, the Tom problem referred to my potential discovery of her activities. Her planned solution involved painting me as controlling and paranoid, while positioning herself as the victim of an unhappy marriage. She'd already begun laying groundwork for this narrative with several of her friends, particularly her best friend Tasha Morrison, who, I noted with interest, was Derick's sister. The final document in the folder was titled Exit Strategy and dated just 2 weeks ago. It outlined Nicole's plan to transition from her marriage to me to a relationship with Aiden, while keeping Brad and Marcus as backup options and maintaining Derick as emotional support. The timeline suggested she was planning to implement this strategy within the next 6 months. I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed by the scope of Nicole's deception. This wasn't just cheating. It was a comprehensive long-term operation designed to ensure she always had multiple options available while maintaining plausible deniability. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. "Dinner running late. Don't wait up. Love you." I looked at the message, then at her computer screen full of evidence of her betrayal, and started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you realize you've been living in a completely different reality than the one you thought you knew. But as I sat there in Nicole's chair, surrounded by the evidence of her elaborate deception, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For months I'd been questioning myself, wondering why I felt disconnected from my wife, why our conversations felt superficial, why she seemed distracted and distant. Now I knew it wasn't me. I wasn't losing my mind or failing as a husband. I was just married to a woman who treated relationships like a business venture. I carefully closed all the folders and shut down the laptop, making sure everything looked exactly as Nicole had left it. Then I went to my own office and started making plans. Nicole thought she was the only one who could play strategic games. She was about to learn that her husband had a few skills she'd underestimated. "Option 3, Nicole," I said to the empty room. "Time to show you what happens when all your carefully managed worlds start colliding." The Anchor was the kind of bar where everybody knew your name, your drink, and your business, whether you wanted them to or not. Located 3 blocks from the harbor, it attracted a mix of fishermen, construction workers, and locals who appreciated honest drinks at honest prices. It was also the unofficial headquarters of Millbrook's gossip network, which made it the perfect place for what I had in mind. I'd been a regular at the Anchor for 5 years, ever since moving to Millbrook. The bartender, Jimmy Kowalski, was a retired cop who'd seen everything twice and wasn't impressed by anything. The regulars included Pete Sullivan, my closest friend, and a former Boston police detective who now ran a private security company, and a rotating cast of characters who treated the bar like their personal social club. It was Thursday night, and I was nursing my second beer while Pete regaled the bar with a story about a cheating spouse case he'd worked the previous month. The irony wasn't lost on me. "So, this woman," Pete was saying, "she's convinced her husband is having an affair because he started working late and paying more attention to his appearance, wants me to follow him, get photos, the whole thing." "And?" asked Danny Morrison, a local contractor who was, coincidentally, Derick's cousin. "Turns out the guy was taking dance lessons, wanted to surprise his wife for their anniversary. She felt like such an ass when I told her that she paid my full fee anyway and made me promise never to mention it to anyone." The bar erupted in good-natured laughter. Jimmy refilled Pete's glass and looked at me. "You're quiet tonight, Tom. Everything okay?" "Just thinking about relationships," I said. "How well do we really know the people we're married to?" "Deep thoughts for a Thursday night," said Eddie Kowalski, Jimmy's brother and a local plumber. "What brought this on?" I took a sip of my beer, choosing my words carefully. Found out recently that my wife has been having regular meetings with her ex-husband. Didn't think to mention it to me. The bar went quiet. In a small town like Millbrook, this kind of revelation was premium entertainment. "Nicole's been seeing Derick?" asked Danny, leaning forward with interest. "Among others, apparently." Pete set down his drink and looked at me seriously. "Tom, what are you talking about?" I'd rehearsed this moment, knowing that once I started talking, the information would spread through Millbrook faster than a nor'easter. Let's just say my wife has a more active social life than I realized. Derick, that restaurant owner Brad Hutchins, some guy from her office, and a luxury car dealer named Aiden. "Jesus," whispered Eddie. "All at the same time?" Apparently, Nicole believes in diversification. Jimmy leaned across the bar. "Are you sure about this, Tom? That's a serious accusation." "I'm sure. Had coffee with Derick yesterday. He showed me text messages. Nicole's been telling each of these guys different stories about our marriage, keeping them all on the hook while she decides which one offers the best future prospects." Danny shook his head. "I never liked Nicole. Too smooth, you know? Like she was always working an angle." "Danny," Pete warned. "What?" "It's true. Remember when she tried to get me to renovate that property for free because it would be good exposure? Who needs exposure in a town of 8,000 people?" The conversation continued, with each person sharing their own Nicole story. It turned out my wife had made quite an impression on the locals, and not always a positive one. She'd tried to negotiate down prices with local contractors, had been condescending to waitresses and shop clerks, and had a reputation for being charming to people who could help her and dismissive of those who couldn't. "So what are you going to do?" Pete asked. "I'm exploring my options." "Divorce? Maybe. Or maybe I'll try something more creative." Pete raised an eyebrow. "Tom, whatever you're thinking, be careful. Don't do anything that could come back to bite you legally." "Don't worry. I'm not planning anything illegal. Just educational." As the evening progressed, I shared carefully selected details about Nicole's operation. I mentioned Aiden's expensive tastes and his belief that Nicole was planning to leave me for him. I talked about Brad's romantic delusions and Marcus's professional involvement. I even mentioned Nicole's strategic planning documents, though I was vague about how I'd obtained that information. By closing time, every person in the Anchor knew that Nicole Richardson was playing multiple men against each other while maintaining the facade of a happy marriage. More importantly, they were talking about it with the enthusiasm of people who'd been handed premium gossip material. As Pete and I walked to our cars, he grabbed my arm. "Tom, I know you're hurt and angry, but be smart about this. Nicole sounds like the type who'll try to destroy you if she feels cornered. She can try. I'm serious. Women like Nicole are dangerous when they're desperate. They'll lie, manipulate, play victim, whatever it takes to come out on top." I looked at my oldest friend, appreciating his concern. Pete had seen enough domestic situations go bad during his police career to know what he was talking about. I appreciate the warning, but Nicole made one critical error in her planning. "What's that?" "She assumed all her backup plans would stay separate and manageable. She never considered what would happen if they started working together." Pete grinned. "You've been talking to Derick." "Among others. Turns out, when you treat people like chess pieces, eventually they figure out they're being played. And then the chess pieces decide to play their own game." As I drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in months. Nicole's carefully constructed world was about to become much more complicated, and she didn't even know it yet. I pulled into my driveway to find Nicole's car already there. The lights were on in our bedroom, and I could see her silhouette moving around as she got ready for bed. She'd probably spent the evening with Aiden, listening to his plans for their future, while nodding sympathetically and making encouraging noises. Tomorrow, she'd wake up and go about her routine, managing her various relationships, with the confidence of someone who believed she had everything under control. She had no idea that her carefully separated worlds were about to start colliding in spectacular fashion. "Sleep well, Nicole," I said to myself as I headed inside. Tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day. Friday morning brought the first signs that Nicole's world was beginning to shift. I was in the kitchen making coffee when her phone started ringing. It was barely 7 a.m. "Hello?" Nicole answered, still in her robe, sounding annoyed at being disturbed so early. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I could see Nicole's expression change from annoyance to confusion to something approaching panic. "What do you mean people are talking? Talking about what?" She listened for a moment, then walked quickly toward her office, lowering her voice. I continued making coffee, humming softly to myself. The Millbrook gossip network was apparently running at peak efficiency. 20 minutes later, Nicole emerged from her office looking like she'd seen a ghost. She was fully dressed, her makeup perfect, but there was something frantic in her eyes. "I have to go to work early," she announced. "Crisis with a client." "Everything okay?" "Fine. Just some rumors that need to be handled professionally." She kissed my cheek, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, my phone rang. "Tom, it's Derick. We might have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Aiden showed up at my shop this morning. He's pissed off and asking questions about my relationship with Nicole. Apparently someone told him that Nicole's been seeing multiple guys." I smiled. "Interesting. What did you tell him?" "The truth, that Nicole's been playing all of us, and I'm tired of being played. He didn't take it well." "Define, didn't take it well." "He called me a liar and threatened to kick my ass if I didn't stop spreading malicious gossip about his girlfriend." "His girlfriend?" "Yeah, that's what he called her. Tom, this guy thinks Nicole is going to leave you and marry him. He's already picked out engagement rings." I laughed, genuinely amused. Poor Aiden. He really doesn't understand the game he's playing. "There's more. After he left my shop, he went to the wharf looking for Brad. Made a scene in front of the breakfast crowd, accusing Brad of trying to steal his woman." "How do you know this?" "My cousin Danny was there having breakfast. He called me immediately. Apparently Brad had no idea who Aiden was or why some stranger was yelling at him about Nicole. The whole thing was a disaster." I could picture the scene, Aiden, in his expensive suit, confronting Brad in his own restaurant while confused diners watched the drama unfold. It was better than anything I could have planned. "Where's Aiden now?" According to Danny, he stormed out of the wharf and headed toward Nicole's office. I'm guessing he's demanding answers. This should be interesting. "Tom, are you sure you want to let this play out naturally? It's going to get messy." "Derick, my friend, sometimes messy is exactly what's needed." After hanging up with Derick, I called Pete. "You work fast," he said by way of greeting. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Right. Well, whatever you didn't do, it's working. Half the town is talking about Nicole's love life, and the other half is asking questions about why they weren't talking about it sooner. Any interesting developments?" "Funny you should ask. I just got a call from Jimmy at the Anchor. Apparently some fancy-dressed guy came in around 9 this morning asking if anyone knew Tom Richardson and whether his wife was the kind of woman who cheats." "What did Jimmy tell him?" "Jimmy told him that Tom Richardson was a good guy who minded his own business, and maybe the fancy-dressed guy should do the same. The guy got aggressive, so Jimmy asked him to leave. Aiden's having a bad morning." I figured. Pete paused. "Tom, this guy sounds unstable. Maybe you should consider staying somewhere else for a few days." "I'm not running from my own house." "I'm not talking about running, I'm talking about strategy. Let Nicole deal with the mess she created without having to worry about you getting caught in the crossfire." It was good advice, but I wasn't ready to leave. I wanted to see how Nicole handled the situation when her carefully managed worlds started colliding without her control. Around noon, my phone rang. "Nicole." "Tom, we need to talk." "About what?" Not over the phone. Can you meet me at home? I'm already at home. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up without saying goodbye, which was unlike her. Nicole prided herself on her phone etiquette. I spent the next 20 minutes straightening up the house and preparing for what was sure to be an interesting conversation. Nicole's car pulled into the driveway exactly 20 minutes later, followed immediately by a silver BMW that I didn't recognize. Through the window, I watched Nicole get out of her car and walk quickly to the BMW. She leaned down to talk to the driver, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Aiden. Their conversation was brief and appeared heated. Nicole kept glancing toward the house while Aiden gestured emphatically. Finally, she straightened up, said something that made Aiden's face darken, and walked toward the front door. The BMW sat in our driveway for another minute before pulling away with more acceleration than was strictly necessary. Nicole came through the front door looking like she'd spent the morning in a war zone. Her perfect hair was slightly mussed, her makeup needed touching up, and there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested she was operating on pure adrenaline. "We have a problem," she announced. "Do we?" "Someone's been spreading rumors about me. Malicious, false rumors about my friendships with other men." I sat down in my favorite chair, the one Nicole always complained was too worn and shabby for our living room. "What kind of rumors?" "People are saying I'm having affairs. Multiple affairs. It's ridiculous and hurtful, and I need to know if you're behind it." "Why would I spread rumors about my own wife?" Nicole studied my face, looking for signs of deception. She was good at reading people. It was part of what made her successful in real estate. But I'd had time to prepare for this conversation. "Because you're angry about Derick," she said finally. "Should I be angry about Derick?" "We're friends. I told you that." "You told me a lot of things, Nicole. The question is, how much of it was true?" She sat down across from me, switching to what I recognized as her negotiation mode. Her voice became softer, more reasonable, designed to make me feel like we were partners working toward a solution. "Tom, I know this situation is complicated, and I know I should have been more transparent about my friendships. But these rumors are threatening my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for." "What exactly are people saying?" "That I'm manipulating multiple men, playing them against each other, planning to leave you for someone with more money." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "It's insane." "Is it?" The question hung in the air between us. Nicole's carefully constructed expression faltered for just a moment, and I caught a glimpse of something I'd never seen before: fear. "What do you mean?" "I mean, is it insane? Or is it just inconvenient?" Nicole stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to this. I came here hoping we could work together to handle this crisis, but if you're going to join the lynch mob, then maybe we need to reconsider our entire relationship." "Maybe we do." She stared at me, apparently shocked that I wasn't backing down or apologizing. In the 3 years we'd been married, I'd always been the one to compromise, to smooth things over, to avoid conflict. But that version of Tom Richardson had been operating under false assumptions about his marriage. "Fine," she said finally. "If that's how you want to play this, then that's how we'll play it. But don't expect me to make this easy for you." She headed toward the stairs, probably planning to pack a bag and leave for a few days while she figured out her next move. But she stopped at the bottom of the staircase and turned back to me. "Just so you know, Tom, I'm not the villain in this story. I'm a woman who's been trying to figure out what she wants while dealing with a husband who's more interested in his hobbies than his marriage. If I've made mistakes, it's because I've been lonely and confused, not because I'm some kind of master manipulator." It was a good speech, delivered with just the right amount of vulnerability and defiance. If I hadn't seen her strategy documents, I might have even believed it. "Nicole," I said as she started up the stairs. "What?" "Option 3 is going to be more interesting than you think." She paused, her hand on the banister, but didn't turn around. After a moment, she continued up the stairs, leaving me alone in the living room with the satisfying knowledge that Nicole's perfectly controlled world was beginning to crack. My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. Just heard Aiden's car got keyed in the parking lot behind the wharf. Someone wrote homewrecker on the windshield. Any idea who might have done that? I texted back, no idea, but I hear car repairs can be expensive. Pete's response was immediate. You're enjoying this way too much. He was probably right, but after months of feeling like I was losing my mind, after discovering that my marriage was essentially a business arrangement I hadn't been informed about, I was entitled to a little satisfaction. Besides, this was just the beginning. Nicole thought she was dealing with a crisis that could be managed with the right combination of damage control and emotional manipulation. She had no idea that her crisis was about to become a complete disaster. And the best part? It was all going to be her own fault. Saturday morning brought chaos in the form of Tasha Morrison, Nicole's best friend and Derick's sister, pounding on my front door at 8 a.m. Through the window, I could see her pacing on my front porch like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear. I opened the door to find Tasha in full crisis mode, hair uncombed, wearing yesterday's clothes, eyes wild with the kind of panic that comes from having your world turned upside down overnight. Where is she? Tasha demanded, pushing past me into the house. Good morning to you too, Tasha. Nicole's not here. I know she's not here. She's not answering her phone, she's not at her office, and her car's not at any of her usual places. Where is she? I closed the door and turned to face Tasha, who was now standing in my living room like she owned it. Tasha Morrison was 34, worked as a real estate agent in Nicole's office, and had always treated me with the barely concealed disdain of someone who thought her best friend had married beneath her station. I assume she's with one of her friends, I said. She has several, as I'm sure you know. Tasha's face flushed. This is all your fault. What's my fault? The rumors, the gossip. You've destroyed her reputation because you couldn't handle the fact that she has male friends. I walked to the kitchen and started making coffee, forcing Tasha to follow me if she wanted to continue the conversation. Would you like some coffee? You look like you could use it. I don't want coffee. I want you to fix this mess. What mess is that exactly? Tasha slammed her hand on the kitchen counter. Don't play dumb, Tom. Half the town thinks Nicole is some kind of serial cheater, her clients are asking questions, and that psycho Aiden won't stop calling the office demanding to speak to her. Aiden's calling her office? Every hour on the hour. He's convinced that Nicole is in love with him and that everyone else is lying to break them up. He's also convinced that you're behind some kind of conspiracy to ruin his relationship. I poured myself a cup of coffee, taking my time. Sounds like Aiden has some issues to work through. This isn't funny, Tom. Nicole's career is being destroyed by malicious gossip, and you're acting like it's some kind of joke. Tell me something, Tasha. How long have you known about Nicole's friendships? The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it, clearly trying to decide how much she should reveal. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You're Nicole's best friend and her colleague. You know about Derick, Brad, Marcus, and Aiden. You probably helped her manage her schedule so she could see all of them without conflicts. Tasha's silence was confirmation enough. The question is, I continued, did you think I'd never find out? Or did you just not care? Nicole's personal life is her business. Even when her personal life involves lying to her husband? Marriage is complicated, Tom. Just because you're too naive to understand that doesn't mean Nicole should have to live like a nun. I set down my coffee cup and looked at Tasha. Really looked at her. She was defending Nicole's behavior with the righteous indignation of someone who believed she was on the moral high ground. In her mind, I was the problem for expecting honesty from my wife. You're right, I said. Marriage is complicated, but it's a lot less complicated when both people are playing by the same rules. What's that supposed to mean? It means Nicole and I are going to have to renegotiate our arrangement. My phone rang before Tasha could respond. The caller ID showed Derick's number. "Excuse me," I told Tasha, then answered the call. "Morning, Derick." "Tom, we've got a situation. Aiden showed up at my shop again, but this time he brought friends." "What kind of friends?" "The kind that wear expensive suits and ask a lot of questions about my relationship with Nicole. I think he hired some kind of investigators." Tasha was listening to every word, her face growing paler by the minute. "Are you okay?" I asked Derick. "I'm fine. But these guys are thorough. They're asking about Nicole's schedule, her habits, her other relationships. They're also asking about you." "About me?" "They want to know if you're the type of guy who might hire someone to sabotage Aiden's car or spread rumors about Nicole. I told them you were too smart to do anything that obvious." I looked at Tasha, who was now sitting at my kitchen table with her head in her hands. "Thanks for the vote of confidence. Anything else?" "Yeah. They're planning to talk to Brad next, then Marcus. Aiden's apparently convinced that if he can prove Nicole's other relationships are just friendships, he can win her back." "Good luck with that." "Tom, there's something else. Nicole called me this morning." "Oh?" "She wanted to know if I'd be willing to tell people that our relationship has always been platonic. She offered to pay me." I nearly choked on my coffee. "She offered to pay you to lie about your relationship?" $5,000 to say we've never been anything more than friends, and to sign some kind of statement saying I've never had romantic feelings for her." Tasha looked up from the table, her eyes wide with horror. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "I told her to go to hell." "Good man." After I hung up with Derick, Tasha and I sat in silence for several minutes. She seemed to be processing the implications of what she'd just heard. "She's panicking," Tasha said finally. "Wouldn't you?" "Tom, you have to understand, Nicole never meant for things to get this complicated. She was just keeping her options open. By lying to everyone involved? By being practical. Nicole's been hurt before. She learned to protect herself. By hurting other people?" Tasha stood up abruptly. "I need to find her. She needs to know what's happening." "Good luck with that." "But Tasha?" She turned back to me. "When you do find Nicole, tell her that option 3 is working out better than I expected." After Tasha left, I spent the rest of the morning fielding phone calls. Pete called to tell me that Aiden's investigators had been asking questions about me at the Anchor. Jimmy called to let me know that the same investigators had tried to bribe him for information about my conversations with other bar patrons. Even my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, called to report that strange men in suits had been asking her about my marriage. By noon, it was clear that Aiden was conducting a full-scale investigation into what he perceived as a conspiracy against his relationship with Nicole. The irony was delicious. In his desperation to prove that Nicole was faithful to him, he was uncovering evidence of just how unfaithful she'd been to everyone. My phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. "Tom Richardson?" "Speaking. This is Marcus Chen from Coastal Properties. I think we need to talk." Marcus was Nicole's colleague, one of the men in her rotation. We'd never met, but I'd seen his picture in Nicole's email folder. "What can I do for you, Marcus?" "I'm calling about Nicole. There are some very serious allegations being made about her personal life, and I think there's been a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "The kind that could destroy an innocent woman's reputation. Look, I know Nicole's been going through a difficult time in her marriage, and I've been providing emotional support as a friend and colleague, but some people are trying to make it sound like something it's not." I almost felt sorry for Marcus. He genuinely believed he was Nicole's confidant, the one person who truly understood her situation. He had no idea he was just another chess piece in her game. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How long have you and Nicole been providing emotional support to each other?" "About 8 months. She was really struggling with feeling unappreciated in her marriage, and I was going through my own divorce. We helped each other through some tough times." And during these tough times, did Nicole ever mention that she was also receiving emotional support from her ex-husband Derick? There was a long pause. What? Or from Brad Hutchins, the restaurant owner. Another pause, longer this time. Marcus, are you still there? She told me I was the only one she could talk to about her problems. I'm sure she did. Did she also tell you that she was planning to leave me as soon as she figured out her best option? Tom, I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, Marcus, I think there's been a revelation. I hung up, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and pity. Marcus was about to have the same awakening I'd had, the same realization that the woman he thought he knew was actually a carefully constructed fiction designed to manipulate his emotions. My phone immediately rang again. Marcus, calling back. Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Shoot. Is Nicole seeing other men? What do you think? I think I've been an idiot. Welcome to the club, Marcus. We meet for drinks at the Anchor every Thursday. There was a bitter laugh on the other end of the line. Jesus, how many of us are there? Depends on how you count. Current active roster or total historical? This is unbelievable. Marcus, can I give you some advice? At this point, I'll take any advice I can get. Don't let Nicole know you figured it out. Not yet. Let her keep thinking she has you fooled while you decide what you want to do with this information. Why? Because knowledge is power, and right now, Nicole thinks she's the only one with any real knowledge about what's been going on. The longer she believes that, the more mistakes she'll make. After hanging up with Marcus, I realized that Nicole's carefully constructed world wasn't just cracking, it was collapsing completely. Aiden's investigation was forcing everyone to examine their relationships with Nicole, and none of them were going to like what they found. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Nicole. We need to talk. Meet me at the wharf at 7 p.m. Come alone. I looked at the message, then at the clock. It was already 3 p.m., which meant I had 4 hours to prepare for what was sure to be Nicole's attempt to regain control of the situation. I texted back, "See you at 7. Then I called Pete. Want to have dinner at the wharf tonight? Sure. Any particular reason? Just thought you might enjoy the entertainment. What kind of entertainment? The kind where all the chickens come home to roost at the same time. The wharf was packed for a Saturday night, which was exactly what I'd hoped for. Brad Hutchins had done an excellent job turning the old waterfront building into Millbrook's premier dining destination, complete with exposed brick walls, nautical decor, and large windows overlooking the harbor. More importantly for my purposes, it was the kind of place where conversations carried and everyone could see everyone else. I arrived at exactly 7 p.m. to find Nicole already seated at a corner table, looking like she'd spent the day at a spa rather than managing a crisis. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and she wore a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was playing the role of the sophisticated woman who was above the petty gossip swirling around her. "Tom," she said as I sat down, her voice carefully modulated to sound both relieved and slightly wounded. "Thank you for coming. Wouldn't miss it." She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, a gesture that would look affectionate to anyone watching but felt calculating to me. "I know things have been difficult between us lately, but I think we can work through this if we're honest with each other." Honesty. That's an interesting place to start. Nicole's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I know you're angry about my friendships with other men, and I understand why. I should have been more transparent about my relationships." Relationships, plural. "Friendships," she corrected. "Tom, I need you to understand something. Yes, I've been spending time with Derick, Brad, and a few other friends. But these are platonic relationships based on mutual support and shared interests. Nothing more." I looked around the restaurant, noting the familiar faces scattered throughout the dining room. Pete was sitting at the bar, nursing a beer and pretending to watch the baseball game on TV. Danny Morrison was having dinner with his wife 2 tables over. Even Mrs. Callahan was there, enjoying what appeared to be a date with elderly Mr. Patterson from the hardware store. "What about Aiden?" I asked. Nicole's composure cracked slightly. "What about him?" "Is your relationship with Aiden also platonic?" "Aiden is complicated. He's developed feelings for me that I don't reciprocate, and he's been having trouble accepting that I'm married." "Is that why he's been telling people you're going to leave me for him?" "Tom, I can't control what other people say or think. I've been clear with Aiden that I'm committed to my marriage." It was a masterful performance, delivered with just the right combination of sincerity and vulnerability. If I hadn't read her emails, I might have believed every word. "Nicole, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you remember what you told me Thursday night? About Derick remaining in your life whether I liked it or not?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I was upset. I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "How did you mean it?" "I meant that I wasn't going to abandon a friend just because you were jealous." "And the ultimatum? Deal with it or leave?" I was frustrated. We both said things we didn't mean. I leaned back in my chair, studying my wife's face. She was good. Very good. If I were a stranger listening to this conversation, I'd probably think I was witnessing a misunderstood woman trying to save her marriage from her paranoid husband. "Nicole, what would you say if I told you I knew about the strategy documents?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Her carefully maintained composure crumbled, and for a moment, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The files on your computer, the profiles of each man in your life, including their financial situations and usefulness ratings, the scheduling calendars, the contingency plans." Nicole's face went white. She glanced around the restaurant, suddenly aware of how public our location was. "Tom, I can explain." The exit strategy document was particularly interesting. Very detailed timeline for transitioning from our marriage to a relationship with Aiden while keeping the others as backup options. "You went through my computer?" Her voice was louder than she'd intended, and several nearby tables turned to look at us. Nicole realized her mistake immediately and lowered her voice. "You violated my privacy. I discovered the truth about my marriage. There's a difference." Nicole was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to decide on her next move. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The vulnerability was gone, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "Fine. You want honesty? Here's honesty. Yes, I've been keeping my options open. Yes, I've been maintaining relationships with other men. But do you want to know why? Please, enlighten me." "Because you're boring, Tom. You're a nice guy, but you're boring. You're content with your little business, your little house, your little life. You have no ambition, no drive, no vision for anything bigger than what we have right now." The words were designed to hurt, and they did, but they also clarified something for me. This wasn't the woman I'd married speaking. This was the woman I'd married revealing who she'd always been underneath the act. "So you decided to shop for a replacement?" "I decided to keep my options open until I figured out what I really wanted." "And what do you really want, Nicole?" "I want a life that's worthy of me. I want a partner who challenges me, who can give me the kind of life I deserve. I want someone who sees my potential and helps me achieve it." "And you thought you'd find that with Aiden?" "Aiden has ambition. He has money. He has vision. He also has investigators following your ex-husband around town because he thinks there's a conspiracy to break you up." Nicole's eyes widened. "What? You didn't know? Aiden hired private investigators to prove that your relationships with other men are innocent. They've been questioning everyone in town about your marriage, your habits, your schedule. It's quite thorough." "That's insane." "Is it? Or is it just the logical response of a man who's been told he's your one true love while watching you maintain relationships with multiple other men? Nicole was starting to panic. I could see it in her eyes, in the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Tom, this has gotten out of hand. We need to fix this before it destroys both of us. Both of us? My reputation is ruined. My career is in jeopardy. But your reputation is going to suffer too when people start talking about what kind of husband drives his wife to seek comfort elsewhere. It was a threat, delivered with the cold precision of someone who'd thought through all the angles. Nicole was reminding me that she still had weapons at her disposal. That's an interesting theory, I said. Let's test it. I stood up, and Nicole grabbed my arm. Tom, sit down. People are watching. I know. I looked around the restaurant, making eye contact with several familiar faces, then spoke in a voice loud enough to carry to the nearby tables. Nicole, I want to make sure I understand your position. You're saying that maintaining romantic relationships with multiple men while married to me is justified because I'm boring? Tom, sit down and lower your voice. And you're saying that lying to each of these men about the nature of your relationships with the others is acceptable because you were keeping your options open? The restaurant had gone quiet. Even the kitchen staff seemed to have stopped working to listen to our conversation. Tom, please. And you're saying that creating detailed strategy documents to manage these relationships, including exit strategies for leaving our marriage, is reasonable behavior for a married woman? Nicole was now visibly shaking. Stop it. I'm just trying to understand your logic, Nicole. Help me out here. Brad Hutchins appeared at our table, looking uncomfortable but determined. Folks, is everything okay here? Nicole looked up at Brad with desperate eyes. Brad, please. This is a private conversation. Nicole? Brad's voice was confused. I thought you said your husband didn't know about us. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Nicole's face went from white to red to white again. Brad, there is no us. We're friends. Friends? Brad's voice was getting louder. Nicole, you told me you were leaving your husband. You said you loved me. You said we were going to be together. The restaurant was now completely silent, except for Brad's voice and the sound of Nicole's world collapsing in real time. Brad, you misunderstood. I misunderstood? Nicole, I have text messages. I have voicemails. I have 3 months of you telling me that your marriage was a mistake and that you wanted to be with me. I sat back down, fascinated by the spectacle unfolding in front of me. This was better than anything I could have planned. Brad, Nicole said desperately, you're making a scene. I'm making a scene? You've been lying to me for months and I'm making a scene? Pete appeared at the table, his ex-cop instincts kicking in. Hey everyone, let's take this down a notch. But it was too late. The dam had burst, and there was no stopping the flood. You want to know the truth? Brad said, addressing the entire restaurant now. Nicole Richardson has been telling me she's going to leave her husband while apparently telling her husband that we're just friends. Which one of us is she lying to? Both of you. The voice came from the restaurant's entrance. We all turned to see Aiden Blackwood standing in the doorway, looking like he'd been through hell. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his perfect hair was disheveled, and his eyes had the wild look of a man who'd discovered that everything he believed was wrong. She's lying to both of you, Aiden repeated, walking toward our table, just like she's been lying to me. Nicole looked like she was going to faint. Aiden, what are you doing here? I came to have dinner with my girlfriend, remember? The woman who's going to leave her boring husband and start a new life with me? The restaurant was now completely silent, except for Aiden's voice and the sound of chairs creaking as people turned to get a better view of the drama. But then I had an interesting conversation with a man named Marcus Chen, Aiden continued. Turns out, you've been telling him the same story you've been telling me, and Brad here, and probably half the men in this town. Aiden, please. Do you want to know what I learned from my investigators, Nicole? Do you want to know what they found when they started digging into your relationships? Nicole was now crying, but they weren't the strategic tears she'd used on me so many times. These were tears of genuine panic and humiliation. I learned that you're not a victim of a bad marriage, Aiden said. You're a predator who uses men like credit cards. When one stops working, you pull out another one. The restaurant erupted in whispers and gasps. This was the kind of scandal that would be talked about in Millbrook for years. That's enough, Nicole said, standing up on shaky legs. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, said a new voice from behind her. We all turned to see Derick Morrison standing near our table, holding what appeared to be a legal document. Nicole Richardson, Derick said formally, you're being served with a civil suit for fraud and emotional distress. He handed her the papers, then looked around the restaurant. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption, but I wanted to serve these papers in a public place so there would be witnesses. Nicole stared at the legal documents in her hands like they were written in a foreign language. You can't sue me for having relationships. I'm not suing you for having relationships, Derick said. I'm suing you for fraud, for deliberately misrepresenting your intentions in order to obtain money, gifts, and services from me under false pretenses. I never asked you for money. No, but you accepted it. You accepted rent payments, car repairs, dinners, gifts, and emotional labor based on false representations about your feelings and intentions. Aiden stepped forward. I want in on that lawsuit. Me too, said Brad. Nicole looked around the restaurant at all the faces staring at her, then back at me. Tom, please, don't let them do this to me. I stood up and looked at my wife, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time. Nicole, you told me I had two choices. Deal with your behavior or leave. But you were wrong. There was always a third option. What option? Let you deal with the consequences of your own choices. I placed a $20 bill on the table to cover my drink, then walked toward the restaurant's exit. Behind me, I could hear Nicole's voice growing more desperate as she tried to explain herself to the crowd, but I didn't turn around. As I reached the door, I heard Pete's voice calling after me. Tom, wait up. I paused at the entrance and turned back to look at the scene I was leaving behind. Nicole was surrounded by angry men and curious onlookers, her perfect composure completely shattered. Aiden and Brad were comparing notes about the lies she'd told them. Derick was explaining the legal basis for his lawsuit to anyone who would listen. It was chaos, but it was honest chaos. For the first time in months, everyone in Nicole's orbit knew exactly where they stood. You know what the funny thing is? I said to Pete as we walked toward our cars. What's that? Nicole was right about one thing. I am boring. I'm the kind of guy who expects honesty from his wife, loyalty from his friends, and consequences for bad behavior. Apparently, that makes me boring. Pete laughed. If that's boring, then boring is underrated. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Nicole's world had collapsed, but it had collapsed under the weight of her own deceptions. I hadn't destroyed her. She'd destroyed herself. I just made sure everyone was watching when it happened. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. I looked at the message, then deleted it without responding. Nicole was wrong. It was over. It had been over the moment she decided to treat our marriage like a business arrangement and other people like disposable assets. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at my house. My house now, not our house. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding my life without Nicole's elaborate deceptions and manipulations. It would be a simpler life, maybe even a boring life. But it would be an honest life, and after everything I'd been through, that sounded pretty good.